The night I stopped believing in the law was the night I became its shadow. My name is Elena Cross, and this is not a testimony meant for courts, nor is it a plea for forgiveness. This is the sound of silence breaking after years of carrying truths too heavy to be spoken aloud. They say revenge eats you alive, but what they never admit is that sometimes you need to be consumed before you can finally feel whole again. When I was younger, I believed in systems, in structure, in the promise that justice, though slow, always arrived. My father taught me to trust it, a man who paid his taxes on time, who believed shaking hands and keeping your word meant something in this city. But faith is fragile, and it only takes one predator in a tailored suit to destroy it. That predator's name was Victor Kane, a politician draped in charisma, a man who promised opportunity but delivered ruin. He didn't just ruin neighborhoods with his policies, he ruined families with his greed. And one of those families was mine. My father was a whistleblower, though no one calls him that now. They call him an unfortunate casualty of a botched investigation. That's the phrase I found in the report after he died, the phrase Kane's office repeated like a mantra until it became official truth. But I know better. My father discovered fraud in Kane's infrastructure projects, money funneled through shell companies, contracts awarded to ghosts, whole budgets vanishing into thin air while communities starved. He tried to speak. He tried to warn. And then one night, walking home, he didn't make it. They called it a mugging, just another statistic in a violent city. But I knew. The bruises didn't match. The timing didn't fit. And the silence that followed, the silence from people who once praised his honesty, was louder than any confession. I remember standing at his grave, my hand pressed against the cold stone, promising him I'd find the truth. That promise became my life. I was 22 then, and grief sharpened into obsession before I even understood what was happening. I didn't just mourn, I archived. I collected. I followed trails no one else cared to see. Late at night, while the city slept, I filled notebooks with dates, faces, whispers of transactions pulled from public records, contracts buried in annexes no one read. I wasn't just keeping a diary, I was building a weapon. And like all weapons, it needed patience to be effective. For years, Kane thrived. He smiled on billboards, shook hands at fundraisers, kissed babies on campaign trails. And each time I saw his face, it wasn't charisma I saw, it was rot dressed in silk. I worked jobs that gave me access to information, archivist positions, research roles, places where I could slip unnoticed into the background while absorbing details like a sponge. I learned the patterns of corruption, the cadence of political deceit, how promises morphed into contracts and contracts into debts. And everywhere I looked, Kane's name lingered like a shadow. But revenge isn't built overnight. It's crafted piece by piece, like a puzzle only I could see. I didn't want to simply expose him. Exposure wasn't enough. Men like Kane survive scandals. They're baptized in them. No, I wanted him undone, stripped not just of his power but of the illusion of invincibility. I wanted his allies to abandon him, his name to curdle on the lips of those who once cheered it. And for that, I had to be precise. I began with the people closest to him. Not the inner circle, they were fortified, untouchable. I went after the assistants, the drivers, the clerks who processed contracts. I learned who drank too much at bars, who cheated on their spouses, who had debts they couldn't pay. I didn't blackmail them. I listened. People underestimate the power of listening. When you hear someone's secrets, they begin to fear you even before you've spoken a word. Slowly, they gave me fragments, emails forwarded, copies of documents lost from archives, casual confessions whispered into the wrong ears. Alone, they were meaningless. Together, they painted a picture Kane could never afford to let see daylight. There were moments I almost stopped. Nights when exhaustion clawed at me, when I asked myself what I was becoming. Friends drifted away, relationships crumbled because I couldn't let go of my obsession. But then I'd remember my father's face, the way his voice cracked when he spoke about doing the right thing, and I knew stopping wasn't an option. Because this wasn't just about me, it was about every voice Kane had silenced, every family who had lost someone because speaking the truth became a death sentence. The first crack in his armor came quietly. An anonymous envelope sent to a journalist with enough proof to raise eyebrows but not enough to publish. Kane dismissed it as a smear campaign, and the public believed him. But doubt had been planted, and doubt is a slow poison. The second leak hit harder, internal memos showing contracts tied to offshore accounts. Cain blamed rogue staffers, fired 2 aides, and stood in front of cameras with crocodile tears. But the whispers grew louder. Each leak was timed, deliberate, giving him no room to recover before the next hit landed. And yet, he didn't see me. Not once. To him, I didn't exist. And that was my greatest weapon. Because while he hired firms to trace digital trails, while he screamed at advisors to find the mole, I was handwriting my archives, keeping everything in ink and paper, stored in locked boxes only I could open. Old school can't be hacked, and paranoia can't fight ghosts. The night I finally stood in front of him wasn't planned. It was at a fundraiser, a glittering room filled with laughter that reeked of wealth and false promises. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I found a way in, blending with donors who wouldn't recognize me even if they'd seen me before. When Cain's eyes met mine across the room, I saw a flicker, a flash of something he couldn't name but instinctively feared. I didn't speak then. I let the silence hang, long enough for his smile to falter before turning away. It was a seed, and I knew it would grow inside him like rot. The final blow came with precision. A full dossier, years of evidence, every contract, every offshore trail, every witness statement I had collected. I didn't send it to one person. I sent it to everyone, journalists, prosecutors, watchdog groups, his political rivals. Within hours, the story exploded. Cain's empire crumbled faster than I imagined. Allies cut ties. Donors fled. His carefully curated image of integrity collapsed under the weight of undeniable proof. By the end of the week, he was no longer a politician but a defendant. People cheered. They called it justice. They called it accountability. But I didn't cheer. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by notebooks filled with ink and ghosts, and felt nothing but silence. Because here's the truth about revenge, it doesn't heal. It doesn't erase the empty chair at the dinner table or bring back the man who taught me to believe in the law. It only leaves you standing in the wreckage of someone else's life, wondering when the pieces of your own will finally fit again. Now I walk the city and see Cain's name on headlines, his fall dissected by pundits, his downfall celebrated like a public holiday. But none of them know me. None of them know the years I spent in shadows, the nights I cried into notebooks, the relationships I sacrificed to keep a promise whispered at a grave. And maybe that's the way it should be. Because justice, when it comes from the shadows, doesn't ask for applause. It asks for silence. And yet, I can't stop writing. My notebooks aren't empty. They're filled with names, patterns, whispers of corruption that stretch beyond Cain. Because he wasn't the only one. He was just the first. And now that I've tasted the silence that follows vengeance, I know it won't be the last. The night I stopped believing in the law wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something else. Something darker. Something necessary. And if you're hearing this, know that silence always remembers. And so do I.